So today I want to talk about good guys. Why do we root for good guys? Well, the easy answer is, well, they're good. And obviously we want to be good and we want to see good things happen. And so we root for the characters who embody those principles of either justice or fairness or just good in general. And so that's the easy answer. But I do think there are mechanical reasons, storytelling reasons that can inform us for all of our characters for why we typically will kind of identify with good characters and root for them and really like them. Now, if you go anywhere online, the topic of villains has been discussed a lot and why a lot of people will enjoy villainous characters. And there are characters who are villains, who are bad guys, even very bad guys. And while we don't necessarily like those characters, we do enjoy reading about those characters in a sense. You know, a lot of people will talk about greatest characters of all time, and you'll have some villainous characters on there. And that's pretty simple, and this has been discussed a lot of times, and people have kind of pinned down that a storytelling reason behind that is that a lot of times villainous characters are active. It's what they call active characters. And that means that they are making choices and they are affecting the world. And that's obviously a big part of a story. Basically, any story where you have a good guy and a bad guy, the protagonist is the good guy, you're generally going to have to make your evil character very, very, very active. Because he's going to be the one that is driving the story against the good guys, against the protagonist. And so you'll see his decisions will affect the world very much, and his goals will be, he will go after those goals. And a lot of times, good guys are reactive to the bad guy, to the villain. And so the villain will do something and that will affect the world, and now the hero or the good guy will have to respond to that. And you'll see this in storytelling where people will say, like, active characters are good, reactive characters sometimes can feel not as fleshed out, not as interesting. Is if your character's always, and there's definitely truth to that, if your character's always only reacting to things, he's never changing things, then yeah, I mean, that's going to be kind of a start to be a boring character, because it doesn't feel like he has agency. It doesn't feel like his actions matter. Things are just happening to him. And we don't typically want to read about a character whose things are just happening to. Now, one thing is, obviously, in stories, if you have your classical, or even if you have any good versus evil story, typically you will have your good guy will also make active decisions. He's fighting the bad guy. So even though he's reacting to the bad guy, he's reacting in an active way. And so that does kind of help, but that's not necessarily the main reason, I think, why good guys are very interesting characters and we like good guy characters. One thing also that people have discussed as far as villains go is that a lot of times they're a little more complex. This idea of a complex villain. They have shades to their personality. There's a depth to them that sometimes can be lacking in good guy characters to some degree. You have a good guy character, your protagonist will say he's a very good person, and so he'll typically do the right thing if he can in most cases. Whereas your bad guy, well, sometimes he'll do good things, sometimes he'll do bad things, sometimes he'll make decisions that wouldn't necessarily follow along with his goals, or I guess you could say personality, or kind of fit within that evil mold. And so that you will start to have this sense that bad guys have a depth to them. And that's where a lot of the anti-hero, and especially in modern fantasy, like fantasies like Game of Thrones, you have like the gray characters. Ooh, these characters are gray. They have a gray morality. They do good things and they do bad things. There's no villains, there's no heroes. And some people have enjoyed that, particularly because I think they perceive that it adds depth to the character. But the thing is like oftentimes, and there's plenty of examples in fiction of characters who there's not necessarily that depth that people talk about, that gray depth. Still though, people will enjoy those characters, love those characters. If you go watch any reaction online, for some reason I really love watching people reacting to stories. I guess because I'm a storyteller and I enjoy seeing how people interpret stories. But I kind of like watching people react to stories, movies, and stuff. And if you watch anybody reacting to, let's say, a movie like Lord of the Rings, and Lord of the Rings is famously, in juxtaposition to Game of Thrones, is a very, what you could call black and white, I guess, type of story. Now, it's not as, I mean, it's been a lot more has been made about Lord of the Rings being a black and white story, quote unquote, than actually it is. If you think about the story, Frodo, I mean, the whole story, and spoilers, I guess, for a 80-year-old book, Frodo fails at the end. He falls to the temptation of the ring. But back on the topic, one thing you'll notice is that people love the character Aragorn. People love the character Sam, and people really identify with these characters. They love these characters. They really truly they think these are great characters. And both of those characters are very what you could call flat in a sense because it's well they're very good people. They will pretty much in the story they do the right thing effectively every single time. And you can basically kind of predict what they're going to do to some degree based on the fact that you know these are extremely good people. And now they are active. Both of those characters are very active, but at the same time, I don't think activity is the only thing that people care about. And so the thing I guess I'm building up to is in stories, one of the things we look for whether we like a character or not is going to not only be activity, but it's going to be struggle. This is something that the villain oftentimes is not necessarily going to have a whole lot of. But the good guy, the protagonist, like if your protagonist is a good guy, but the hero of the story is going to have a significant amount of struggle. And struggle is really what kind of makes stories work is if everything your character, let's say you built a character in a story and they are effortlessly able to do anything. They're the best at fighting, they're the smartest person in the world, they confound their enemies with no trouble whatsoever. Nothing ever gets the best of them. They never even have to try. Well, that's not very interesting. People just don't really enjoy those types of characters. In fact, you can go and in other stories, I won't name them, but there are other famous examples from recent times of people who basically felt like the stories had used characters like that, and they did not approve of those characters. Now, the thing about good characters, though, is necessarily when you have good versus evil. I mean, this is true in real life, and of course, because it's true in real life, stories are reflections of real life. It's also true in stories. I mean, evil characters, they don't necessarily have a code they have to follow. They have a goal. They have something that they want, and they will achieve. They will try to achieve that thing, but they're not necessarily following any moral standard as evil people. They'll kind of do whatever they have to do to achieve that goal. That can make them interesting, but that also can, to some degree, make them a little less interesting and a little harder to root for because, well, they never have to struggle with any internal thing of like, well, I want to do this, but in order to achieve this, I would have to do this other thing, and then that thing violates my moral code or my standards of behavior. So it's not really, in stories, like there's the physical struggle, and we do enjoy watching physical struggle in stories. But we also really, as humans, as people, we enjoy watching internal struggle, where you are tempted to do something and you overcome that temptation, or you want to achieve something but you deny yourself that thing because of some higher good. And we really, in stories especially in books, that's going to kind of be in a sense, your quote unquote bread and butter of your story is this struggles that arise, and those struggles really properly belong almost exclusively to the good guys. Now you can have a villain who, he's got a code of behavior for whatever reason, and so he'll follow that code, blah, 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 blah. It's a lot easier, though, in real life, again, and reflected in stories, it's a lot easier for an evil person to justify to themselves not following that moral code in this one instance, quote unquote, and breaking that moral code and losing that struggle, or refusing to even have that struggle. And so I think that's an important thing to think about, especially when it comes to good guys. You should be aware that the reader, the audience, probably wants to see a good guy stick with his code. I mean, it's not necessarily impossible to write a good story where a good guy falls or maybe hesitates in some cases. Again, Tolkien made his good guy fail at the end. And that definitely was necessary to the story. It was necessary, and it was built up the whole time. We could kind of see that that was going to occur. And it doesn't make us like Frodo any less. In fact, it makes us understand Frodo a little more and enjoy Frodo as a person a little more. But you'll notice that all the rest of the time of the book, Frodo is not failing. He's not sacrificing his moral code. And we like that. We want that. We want our good guy to be strong. And we're reading about oftentimes good guy characters and following them and enjoying them in the story because they are strong and they've chosen to be strong against those internal struggles and those temptations. And so I think that's, like I said, I think this is good for all characters to, and even just stories in general, to remember that it is struggle and conflict that drive stories, that make stories work. And so you should always be thinking about the conflicts that the characters are going to be experiencing, and that those internal conflicts that good guys will necessarily have, because their options to some degree are quote unquote limited, in the sense that they can't sacrifice. They will usually have a moral code that includes things like, let's say, just for example, don't hurt the innocent. Well, I mean, there are times where potentially hurting the innocent could help them achieve their goal a little faster or easier, or they might have to sacrifice something if they don't hurt an innocent person, and now they'll have to struggle with, well, I want to do this good thing. It is a good thing that I'm trying to do, but if I do it, but if I take this easier path, if I take the easier road, then I will lose this higher quality, this higher good that is, in a sense, even more important than the primary struggle. And that's what's interesting, is oftentimes we can have a primary struggle in a book. The main focus and the main goal, let's say, just break it down to the most basic elements of bad guy needs to be stopped. Bad guy has bad plan, needs to be stopped. That's the primary struggle. That's the primary focus of the book. That's the primary conflict of the book, is bad guy needs to be stopped. And you could say, in a sense, that's the highest good, because that's the good our hero, as far as the story is concerned, that's the highest good, because our hero is trying to, he's the one who's been chosen or has taken the mantle of the person who's going to stop this bad guy from doing this bad thing. And yet, still, our hero oftentimes will have this sense that, well, actually, there's even a higher and more important good that supersedes the even this primary conflict, and that's that moral code that honestly that is honestly fairly universal to the world. I'm not going to say it's entirely universal, because obviously you'll find people who will have different moral codes, but I think it's fairly universal. You'll be hard pressed to find any culture or society that celebrated betraying your friends, or celebrated stealing from people who don't deserve it, or now they may have different or hurting innocent people, and now they may have different very 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 different qualifications for who counts as an innocent person, or who counts as my friend, or who counts as a person that doesn't deserve to be stolen from or hurt. But usually they'll have some group that is considered a friend or a fellow man, and should not be, and they'll govern the behavior toward that person, and they'll govern them, and that behavior, those standards of behavior will often be very, very similar. Don't lie to those people, don't steal from those people, don't hurt those people. Now, in modern times, we definitely have universalized this concept of who are our fellow man and who are people that we shouldn't hurt. And we've kind of universalized that to, well, everyone is your fellow man and everyone deserves to be not stolen from or not betrayed or not lied to. And obviously, we all think that's a good thing, or I hope we all think that's a good thing. Um, and that is just reflected in our stories very, very often. I guess I'm kind of rambling at this point, but yeah, like I said, I think generally uh, the thing that you should focus on from a storytelling perspective, obviously, we don't want to be too mechanical in our discussions. You know, there is flesh and blood, and so sometimes, well, we root for the good guy because he's good and we like good people. But I think from a storytelling perspective, it is good to notice that struggle is kind of the domain of the good guy. It's definitely the hallmark of the good guy, and that can help us, our readers, and us as readers and audience members and writers distinguish our good guy is by making that struggle exist, having the character have to make those decisions to overcome those temptations, overcome those things that are fighting against them, and have that conflict that drives our book. I think everybody should be, if you're writing a book, you need to be really focusing on what is my conflict, what's my main conflict, what are my little conflicts, and understanding that, hey, is that conflict is what makes your story work. And I think that's it for today, and I will see you next time. Peace out.